tell them that when you made it back to Susa, you abandoned him and went home.
I haven't heard a word this dude has said the whole time. Like, have you heard it?
Hey guys, welcome back. Obviously, this is my channel. My name is Micah. This is Winston, the channel mascot, and obviously the British Bulldog. Without further ado, though, we're just gonna jump right into this Napoleon's Marshals. This is the sixth and final installment. Berthier, Lannes, and Davout. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little sad because this is the last one. Obviously, we're gonna jump into some more Napoleons through some other channels, but you know, you gotta admit, freaking Epic History Challenge definitely did them justice. But without further ado, though, we're just gonna jump right into this one.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal, or Maréchal, goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton. The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age. But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals. All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from Lieutenant Colonel Rémy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army. So far, we've met marshals.
I don't know about you guys, but I think I've almost completely memorized this entire intro this entire time. It's a good intro, but I think I've almost memorized it this entire time, though.
Perignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grouchy, Moncey, Poniatowski, Jourdan, Bernadotte, Augereau, Lefebvre, Mortier, Marmont, Saint-Cyr, Oudinot, Victor, Murat, Bessières, MacDonald, Massena, Suchet, Ney, and Soult. 3.
And may I just say, obviously everybody knows Marshal Ney is my favorite. Marshal Marmont, though, is my least favorite. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's just something about him. The fact that he went against Napoleon, and the fact that he's one of the ones who voted against Ney to be, you know, freaking shot down. I don't know, just something about him. I don't like it, but anyway.
Marshal Berthier. Louis-Alexandre Berthier was born at Versailles, 10 miles from Paris. His mother served at the palace as a chambermaid to the future Louis XVIII. His father was a colonel in the Topographical Engineers, a specialist corps of military surveyors. Berthier followed in his father's footsteps, joining the Topographical Engineers aged just 13, and was commissioned lieutenant at 17. He proved a talented and diligent staff officer. 10 years later, he accompanied General Rochambeau to America as part of French support to the colonists in their War of Independence, and witnessed the British defeat at Yorktown. By the time the French Revolutionary Wars broke out, Berthier was a brigadier general with 25 years' service, who'd studied and given much thought to the problems of military organization and command. A reputation for outstanding staff work meant his services were in high demand, and he served as Chief of Staff to Rochambeau, Lafayette, and Luckner. But during the Terror, ties to these politically suspect generals put Berthier himself under the spotlight. He was stripped of his rank and not officially reinstated until 1795, when he became Chief of Staff of the Army of Italy.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy too how there was only like maybe not even a handful. There was only like a couple or a few marshals that really had to deal with, you know what I'm saying, the terror like that. The rest of them were, you know, either you were still coming up or, you know what I'm saying, like you know what I'm saying, obviously, not royalists, but, you know, Republicans and stuff like that. So, but there's only, that I've seen, there's only been like maybe 2, maybe 3 that had to actually deal with making it out of the revolution and stuff like that with their heads and all that.
A chief of staff led the staff section, which was responsible for turning the general's orders into action by drafting written instructions which were sent out by courier, as well as every aspect of army administration, ensuring efficient movement and supply, and collating reports on the enemy, terrain, roads, and anything else that might affect operations. Berthier, building on recent trends in French staff practice, now developed his own comprehensive staff organization. He established 3 sections: his personal office or cabinet, mostly skilled civilian clerks who handled troop movements, transcribed orders, filed reports, and collated intelligence on enemy forces. His private military staff, made up of aides-de-camp, liaison officers and couriers. And the general staff itself, headed by the First Assistant Major General, also divided into 3 sections. The first dealt with additional troop movements, plus auxiliary services such as hospitals, military policing, prisoners of war, and security of supply lines. The second section organized the army's camps and billets. The third section was the topographical section, responsible for maps and reconnaissance. The general structure of Berthier's system changed little over the next 18 years and proved...
I don't know if that was his idea to add the cabinet on top of the private military staff, but if it was, that was a really smart idea, because not only does it free up a lot of extra work, you know, room for his actual military staff so that they can do, you know, more military-based things, but, you know what I'm saying, it brings on, like, I guess, fresher minds, because sometimes after years of being in the military, you know, sometimes it can cloud up your mind. So these type of, like, you know, staff work, that kind of, you know what I'm saying, paperwork type of things, sometimes it is actually better suited for civilian stuff. Like, I know in our military there's a crap ton of civilians doing stuff like that, so it's cool though.
Uniquely effective at handling the challenges posed by a new era of European warfare. Its chief beneficiary would be the Army of Italy's new commander, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon also discovered that his chief of staff possessed immense personal qualities, a heroic capacity for work, meticulous memory and attention to detail, and devotion to duty and discipline. Crucially, he had a gift for turning Napoleon's verbal, sometimes vague, commandments into clear, concise written orders that made sense to his officers and later marshals. Napoleon and Berthier established a highly effective working relationship that would last until 1814. It relied on Berthier's complete acceptance of his subordinate role. He played no part in devising strategy, and never challenged or contradicted Napoleon except on points of logistical detail. When a friend queried his devotion to Napoleon, who was an extremely demanding and short-tempered boss, Berthier replied, "Remember that one day it will be a fine thing to be second to Bonaparte." Berthier's hard work and brilliant staff system underpinned all Napoleon's...
Yeah, if anything, you know, what I'm getting is Berthier was pretty much, you know, Napoleon's right-hand man. Without him, there's a lot of stuff that probably wouldn't have happened or couldn't have happened. Obviously, every single one of his orders that went out to, you know, Spain, went out to all across Germany, all that stuff wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. Because, you know what I'm saying, half the stuff would have been too vague for them. And obviously, some of those marshals trying to come up with their own, like, interpretation of what Napoleon probably meant, probably wouldn't have went too great, because a lot of them weren't the best tacticians. So him doing that was actually, you know what I'm saying, is probably, like, the key point to how, you know, successful Napoleon was across the battlefield when he wasn't on the battlefield. Because obviously, when he was on the battlefield, he could take care of himself, but, you know what I'm saying.
Successes in Italy and beyond. They spent so much time together, Berthier was nicknamed Napoleon's wife. He was personally brave too, leading an attack at Lodi and a cavalry charge at Rivoli. But his genius was for staff work and administration, not army command, as he well knew. When he briefly inherited command of the Army of Italy in 1797, he begged Napoleon to return as soon as possible to take over. Berthier played a crucial role in planning Napoleon's Egyptian expedition of 1798, and masterminded his famous crossing of the Alps in 1800, which saw French troops advance almost 100 miles through the mountains in just 8 days. The same year, Napoleon made Berthier Minister of War, putting him in charge of all French military administration. When Napoleon proclaimed his new empire in 1804, Berthier was the first name on the list of new marshals, with seniority over all others. The next year, his role as Chief of Staff, or Major Général of the Grande Armée, was officially confirmed. In the fast-moving campaign of 1805, Berthier's system ensured Napoleon always had up-to-date information about the location and strength of his own forces, as well as the latest reports on enemy movements, from scouts, spies, and prisoners. Such advantages helped him achieve the stunning encirclement of Mack's Austrian army at Ulm. On campaign, Berthier and the Emperor often travelled together in the imperial coach, working without pause. His workload was immense, but so too were the rewards. Following the victory at Austerlitz, Napoleon made...
Which almost sounds like it could have been really dangerous, because obviously, I don't know. Because, I mean, never mind. Because I'm over here thinking, like, man, they're working like, you know, like president and vice president, but they're not, that's not it. Like, he's literally just working kind of like directly under him and making all his things possible. But, so it doesn't matter if, you know, when something happened to the other, because effectively, kind of Berthier probably works best with Napoleon, so it didn't matter, if that makes sense, I guess.
Made Berthier the hereditary sovereign prince of Neuchâtel and Valenjon, with an enormous private income. Over the course of Napoleon's reign, he received endowments worth more than 1 million francs per year from the emperor, more than any other marshal. Yet Berthier remained a liability as a field commander. In 1809, Napoleon put him in temporary command of the Army of Germany. When Archduke Charles made a bold advance into Bavaria, Berthier's response was hesitant and muddled, and nearly led to Marshal Davout's corps being encircled. Only Napoleon's arrival averted disaster. Returning to his usual role as Chief of Staff, Berthier once more proved his exceptional talents, coordinating the movement of 200,000 men and paving the way for the Emperor's victory at Wagram. The title Prince of Wagram was added to his honors. The invasion of Russia in 1812 was a test like no other for Marshal Berthier and his staff. It required coordinating the movement of 500,000 troops, the biggest army ever seen in Europe, across a 400-mile front. "A simple private is happier than I," Berthier complained. "I am being killed by all this work." By August, it was clear the Grande Armée's supply lines were at breaking point, and Berthier was among those who tried to persuade Napoleon to halt the advance at Smolensk. He was ignored. As disaster engulfed the army, Berthier continued to perform his duty. By the end of the retreat, he was marching on foot with frostbitten fingers. When Napoleon left the army to return to Paris without him, he wept openly. Despite his own poor health in the wake of the retreat, Berthier worked hard to salvage the remnants of the army, and served throughout the campaign in Germany in 1813. By now, Napoleon's enemies had reformed their own army general staffs, partly inspired by Berthier's example. But neither Berthier nor his system was perfect. In May, a confusing order to Marshal Ney contributed to his late arrival at the Battle of Bautzen, and a missed chance to crush the coalition army. Berthier was also notorious for his jealousies and grudges. His pedantic vendetta against Jomini, Ney's talented chief of staff, drove him to defect to the Russians.
I mean, I was about to say, if he's, weeping for Napoleon for when he left, which, I mean, Napoleon shouldn't have left him anyway, because he kind of needs him, but if he's weeping for him or crying for him, if he just left him, can you imagine what, how he feels, like about Marshal Lannes, or how he feels, what I'm saying, about all these other relationships? I can see jealousy kind of sleeping in, maybe, who knows, we'll see.
Berthier must also bear some blame for the disastrous end to the Battle of Leipzig. He knew there weren't enough bridges for the army to retreat safely, but failed to press the matter with Napoleon. When the only bridge out of the city was blown too early, 30,000 men became prisoners. Berthier continued to serve Napoleon faithfully through the desperate defense of France until the Emperor's abdication in April 1814. The restored Bourbon monarchy showered titles and honours on Berthier. The king even gave him an honorary rank in his own guard. Napoleon's return from exile 11 months later put him in an impossible situation, torn both ways by his sense of duty and loyalty. He accompanied the king on his flight to the Netherlands, but was treated with such suspicion by the royal court that he left for his wife's family estate in Bavaria. There, a few weeks later, Berthier fell from a window and was killed. It was most likely a simple accident, though some believe he killed himself out of guilt or despair, or, less plausibly, was murdered by French royalist agents. Napoleon had expected Berthier to rejoin him in 1815.
I mean, it's crazy too, because all of it could be, plausible, because of, the fact that the agents could have got him on the fact that, he was already being, suspicious. I don't know the past tense of that. Suspicious on, through the, court of the royal eyes or whatever, the king and queen and all that stuff, and the fact that I'm sure Napoleon probably felt some type of way about that too, about him leaving, and the fact that he probably felt guilty about leaving too, so who knows, who knows. Kind of sad though, to see him in that, like that though.
And was scathing of his absence. I have been betrayed by Berthier, who was just a gosling, transformed by me into some kind of eagle. But after his defeat at Waterloo, in which mismanaged staff work played an important role, Napoleon conceded, if Berthier had been there, I would not have met this misfortune. Berthier had none of Murat's glamour, nor Ney's heroism, nor the tactical instincts of Davout. But he was the indispensable marshal, whose brilliant administration and tireless work were the foundation for so much of Napoleon's military success. 2. Marshal Lannes.
The best friend, let's see.
Jean Lannes was a farmer's son from Gascony, who quit his job as a dyer's apprentice to join the local volunteer battalion in 1792. Energetic and charismatic, he was immediately elected to be an officer by his comrades. The unit was sent to fight the Spanish on the Eastern Pyrenees front, where Lannes proved a brave and active officer. He distinguished himself in several actions and was promoted to command the regiment. Lannes was then transferred to Italy as part of General Augereau's division, where his bold, aggressive leadership won praise from General Massena, and then at Dago from General Bonaparte himself, who rewarded Lannes with command of a grenadier brigade in the army's advance guard. A month later, at the Battle of Lodi, Colonel Lannes was first across the river, leaping off the bridge and wading ashore under enemy fire. At the Battle of Arcolay, he was wounded twice, but when he heard the French were retreating, he left the dressing station to lead a fresh attack, which probably saved Napoleon from capture or worse. Napoleon later presented the flag he'd waved at the battle to Lannes, and a special bond was formed between them, based on mutual respect and loyalty. Lannes was promoted to Brigadier General, and in 1798 joined Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. He played a prominent role in the campaign, helping to suppress the revolt in Cairo and leading the assaults on Jaffa and Acre, where he was shot in the neck and only saved from certain death by his men, who carried him back to safety. At the Battle of Abu Qir, Lannes' infantry worked with Murat's...
I can already tell, like, I can't even tell. That was such a crappy expedition. Like, so many people, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, could you, because first of all, these guys are in these wool freaking tunics and all this other stuff fighting like this in the Middle East or in Egypt and freaking Israel and all the other stuff. It's kind of crazy just to see them like going like that crazy out there and still being able to win. Like, I'll give them that, but I know a lot of their soldiers also suffered a lot, and a lot of them actually freaking like ended up freaking shooting themselves and stuff like that because they were suffering so much. Well, especially on their march to from Alexandria to Giza. I think that was like the worst one, because that was a really long march. And again, they're wool freaking or whatever. You already know that wasn't cotton that they were wearing. Like, that was some really thick stuff, because it has to, I'm sure, has to be able to protect it against, certain like random, saber attacks and all that stuff, sword attacks, all that other stuff. But yeah, just crazy to think about.
Cavalry to inflict a crushing defeat on the Ottoman army. While recovering from his latest wounds in this battle, Lannes received painful news from home. His wife had given birth to another man's child. He returned to France with Napoleon in October and divorced his wife not long after. When Napoleon staged his coup of 18 Brumaire, Lannes helped to ensure the army's loyalty. The next spring, Napoleon's army marched over the Alps into Italy. Lannes' vanguard led the way, and at Montebello encountered an Austrian force that outnumbered it 2-1. Lannes was able to win a brilliant victory thanks to crucial support from General Victor. Just 5 days later, his division played a key role in Napoleon's great victory at Marengo. Lannes never forgot a favour. He and Victor remained firm friends. But he also never forgot a grudge, was notoriously short-fused, and quick to perceive an insult. In 1800, Lannes remarried to Louise Antoinette Guernuc, daughter of a senator, with whom he'd have 5 children. He was also appointed commander of Napoleon's consular guard, but he was dismissed after General Berthier helped expose his mismanagement of the budget, for which Lannes never forgave him. In semi-disgrace, Lannes was sent as ambassador to Portugal, a short, eventful spell in which, against expectation, his soldierly manner won over Portugal's Prince Regent. By 1804, it was clear that all was forgiven. Lannes received news that he'd been made a...
Yeah, and if anything, I'm sure he was really pissed off about that, just for the fact that, it wasn't on purpose that he mismanaged it. He was probably, obviously on accident. And it was one of those things where he was most likely trying to get it back, to the right spot under cover, without anybody trying to know. Which obviously isn't the best thing to do, but I'm sure he was trying to right his wrongs under, behind closed doors, and, here comes this other fool bringing it up to light. So obviously he's going to be pretty pissed off, but yeah.
All was forgiven. Lannes received news that he'd been made a Marshal of the new French Empire, and orders to return to Paris for Napoleon's coronation. The following year, he took command of 5th Corps of the Grande Armée, forming the vanguard for the advance against the Austrian army in Bavaria. Lannes had to work closely with Marshal Murat, a bitter rival since a falling out in Egypt, but they put their differences aside. Together, they bluffed an Austrian commander into surrendering a vital Danube bridge by persuading him that an armistice had been signed. At one point, Lannes even snatched the fuse from a soldier's hand as he prepared to light the explosive charges. The day before the Battle of Austerlitz, Lannes' quick temper got the better of him. He demanded to fight a duel with Marshal Soult, who in his eyes had made him look foolish in front of the Emperor. Soult ignored the challenge. In the battle that followed, Lannes' 5th Corps held the left flank against Bagration's attacks, later pushing forward with the cavalry to help take 7,000 Russian prisoners. After the battle, Lannes was infuriated that Soult, and not he, was singled out for praise by the Emperor. Within days, Lannes had resigned his command and returned to France. In 1806, with tempers cooled, Napoleon summoned Lannes to rejoin the army for the war with Prussia. Back in command of 5th Corps, Lannes was as active, aggressive and brilliant as ever. At Saalfeld, he fought the first major combat of the war, routing a Prussian division commanded by Prince Louis Ferdinand. 4 days later, at Jena, Lannes opened the main French attack at dawn, with General Suchet's division in the lead. For 6 hours, his troops were engaged in furious fighting for the villages on the plateau, until finally, the Prussian resistance was broken. By December, the war had moved into Poland. Lannes attacked a larger Russian force at Pultusk, but it was a bloody, indecisive affair. Wounds and fever then forced him to convalesce in Warsaw, and so missed the Battle of Eylau. That spring, Lannes resumed command of the advance guard, as Napoleon sought out Bennigsen's Russian army, hoping to force a decisive battle. When Bennigsen located Lannes' apparently isolated corps near Friedland, he attacked. He expected an easy victory, but Lannes, with support from future Marshals Oudinot and Grouchy, expertly used his troops to fend off the Russians, while Napoleon raced to join him with the main army. Lannes' delaying tactics allowed Napoleon to catch the Russian army with its back to the river and inflict a crushing defeat. The following year, Lannes was ennobled as Duke of Montebello and joined Napoleon for the invasion of Spain, despite suffering a serious riding injury en route. Taking command of Marshal Moncey's 3rd Corps, Lannes routed a Spanish army at the Battle of Tudela, sending the enemy fleeing in 2 directions. He was then given command of the siege of Zaragoza. Spanish soldiers and civilians defended the city with legendary courage, but Lannes' leadership and methodical house-by-house approach ensured ultimate victory at a high price. Even Lannes was left shaken by the savagery of the fighting, writing to Napoleon, "Sire, this is a horrifying war." Napoleon recalled Lannes for the war with Austria in 1809.
Yeah, and that's why I always say, like, most of these marshals, because I know a lot of people always say, you know, the mainly the battles and the invasion of Russia was probably most likely what did a lot of these guys in for the, you know, the PTSD and all that stuff. That stuff had been set in. These guys were just like soldiering on through that stuff. Like, you know how many freaking battles these guys have already went through before they went to Russia? You know how many dead bodies they already saw, how many people they shot, how many, you know, how many close calls they already went through, all that stuff. So by the time they went to Russia, they were already battle hardened, and other than the freaking new conscripts, those poor freaking, you know, bastards, excuse my language, had to be baptized by fire. But, you know, these guys, the marshals, that stuff had, by the time they came back, it was already too late. Like, that was, yeah, that was way past that point, you know. Provisional
Corps formed the vanguard for Napoleon's 4-day campaign, a series of quick victories over the Austrians that culminated in the Battle of Egmont. Napoleon next needed Regensburg taken quickly, and so, as usual, he turned to Lannes. After the first assault wave was mown down, Lannes' call for volunteers went unanswered. Furious, he picked up a scaling ladder and shouted, "I'll show you that before I was a marshal, I was a grenadier, and still am." As he rushed forward, his aides grabbed the ladder from him, reorganized the men, and led a successful attack. After occupying Vienna, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the Danube in pursuit of the Austrians. Marshals Lannes and Massena led the way across improvised bridges, supported by Marshal Berthier's cavalry. It was soon clear that Napoleon had miscalculated, and that they faced not just an Austrian rearguard, but the full might of Archduke Charles's army. Massena held the village of Aspern, while Lannes organized the defense of Essling. But desperately needed reinforcements and ammunition were held up, as the Austrians floated obstacles downriver to smash the fragile bridges. Lannes' old rival, Marshal Berthier, was placed under his temporary command. Lannes sent repeated orders for him to charge the enemy, in language that verged on an accusation of cowardice, and that evening the two marshals nearly came to blows. The next day, Lannes' corps led an attack on the Austrian centre, but was driven back by the weight of enemy fire. The French-held villages were under constant, pulverizing bombardment. Around 4 p.m, Lannes' old friend, General Pouzet, was hit by a cannonball and killed in front of him. Lannes, badly shaken, walked off to sit alone for a moment, when a cannonball skipped along the ground and smashed both his legs. Lannes was carried to the rear and placed in the care of the Grande Armée's most famous surgeon, Baron Larrey. Larrey quickly decided that he must amputate one leg. The operation went well, but the wound became infected, and Lannes died 9 days later. Napoleon, who had visited Lannes every day, wept at news of his death. What a loss for France, and for me. Then he wrote to Lannes' wife, "The Marshal has died this morning of the wounds he received on the field of honor. My pain equals yours. I lost the most distinguished general in my army and a companion in arms for 16 years, whom I considered my best friend." Marshal Lannes' death was a great blow to Napoleon and the army. He had proved himself an outstanding commander, as brave as Ney, with the military mind of Soult, the marshal who led Napoleon's vanguard in 4 of his greatest campaigns. His remarkable soldiering skills would be sorely missed by the Emperor in the challenging years that lay ahead. One, Marshal Davout.
All right, here's the Iron Marshal. Let's see what he has to, or what his life was like before all the chaos.
Louis-Nicolas Davout was born into a noble family from Burgundy, with a tradition of military service that went back to the Crusades. At 15, he was sent to the military school in Paris, just missing a young Napoleon Bonaparte, who'd graduated a few weeks before. In 1788, Davout was commissioned into the Royal Champagne Cavalry Regiment, but within a year, his vocal support for the French Revolution had got him into deep trouble. He was forced to resign his commission and spent 6 weeks in prison. In 1791, Davout joined a local volunteer battalion and was elected its deputy commander. The next year, France was at war with Austria and Prussia, and Davout soon proved himself a brave, highly organized and energetic officer. He also won praise for attempting to prevent his commanding officer, General Dumouriez, defecting to the Austrians, though he was not successful. The incident did speed Davout's promotion to brigadier general. But the revolution was now entering its most extreme phase. A new law barred ex-aristocrats from the army, and Davout had to resign his commission once more. A year passed before he was reinstated, with command of a cavalry brigade in the army of the Moselle. He led a series...
I was about to say that aristocratic officer crap was not going to last that long, with how many freaking officers they were beheading for their losses and failures and stuff like that. And the fact that the revolution is about giving everyone a fair chance, so that doesn't mean that just because they had a chance over everyone before, it doesn't mean that now they can't get a fair chance because that goes against what you are preaching, you know what I'm saying? So, just saying.
Of daring operations against the Austrians, winning particular praise from General Desaix, who became a close friend. In 1798, Desaix introduced Davout to his friend, General Bonaparte. Napoleon was not at first impressed. Davout was aloof, untidy and awkward. Napoleon even described him as a damn brute. But he did trust Desaix's judgment, and gave Davout a command in his army bound for Egypt. It was a tough campaign for Davout, who caught dysentery in Cairo, but he further demonstrated his military skill, winning a series of skirmishes on Desaix's expedition into Upper Egypt, and later leading a successful assault on the town of Abu Qir. Soon after their return to France, General Desaix was killed at the Battle of Marengo, robbing Davout of a close friend and patron. However, Napoleon had been won over by Davout's performance in Egypt. He now promoted him General of Division and appointed him Inspector General of Cavalry. Napoleon also encouraged Davout to marry Aimée Leclerc, Pauline Bonaparte's sister-in-law, bringing Davout within the First Consul's extended family. It proved a loving marriage and a great source of strength to Davout in the years ahead. In 1803, Davout was given command of the camp of Bruges, where troops were preparing for the invasion of England. Here he established his reputation as an exceptional administrator and hard taskmaster, enforcing discipline and regular training, while paying attention to his soldiers' welfare and sacking officers who didn't meet his high standards. In 1804, Napoleon proclaimed a new French empire, and Davout, aged 34, became the youngest of its new marshals. His inclusion was a surprise to many, especially as he'd still not commanded anything larger than a brigade in battle. It's very likely that the deaths of Davout's patron, Desaix, and brother-in-law, Leclerc, cleared up.
Yeah, but I mean, still though, a brigade is still a lot of men. That's like well over, I want to say, damn, that's a lot of men still. You know what I'm saying? I want to say it's almost close to like almost 1,000 men. That's like a lot of men usually, because each unit has I don't know. I can't do it's early in the morning, but it's a lot of men though. So I mean, obviously, if he can handle like, close to almost 1,000, if not 1,000 men, he can, it should be able to click to him to be able to manage, put an S on the back of that thousands of men. He should be fine. It shouldn't be that much of a difference, honestly.
Path for him. The next year, Davout's troops became 3rd Corps of the Grande Armée and marched east to take on the Third Coalition. On the eve of the Battle of Austerlitz, Davout force-marched his corps 70 miles in 2 days, arriving at dawn on Napoleon's right flank. His troops went straight into action, holding off a powerful coalition attack, buying time for Napoleon's decisive move against the enemy centre. It was a remarkable performance by 3rd Corps, soon eclipsed by an even greater feat of arms the next year in the war against Prussia. As Napoleon concentrated his forces at Jena to attack what he believed was the main Prussian army, he ordered Davout's 3rd Corps and Bernadotte's 1st Corps to cut off their retreat. But 10 miles north of Napoleon, near Auerstedt, Davout ran straight into the main Prussian army. With no sign of support from Marshal Bernadotte's 1st Corps, Davout's 26,000 men faced odds of more than 2 to 1. Davout's masterful handling of his troops enabled 3rd Corps to repel the Prussian onslaught. Then, his line stabilized, Davout went on the offensive and routed the enemy army. It was a stunning victory, won at a high price. 1 in 4 of Davout's men were either killed or wounded. When Napoleon heard the first report, he was incredulous. "Your marshal must have been seeing double," he told his aide-de-camp, making a joke of Davout's spectacle wearing. When the report was confirmed, he sent a message back to Davout. "Tell the Marshal that he, his generals and his troops have gained everlasting claims on my gratitude." He later gave 3rd Corps the honour of being the first troops to enter Berlin. The next year, at Eylau, Davout's corps again played a pivotal role, trying to turn the Russian flank. When his men were driven back, Davout rallied them, shouting, "The cowards will die in Siberia, the brave will die on the field of honour." This time, 3rd Corps could not break through, but its tenacity helped persuade the Russians to retreat that night. Following the peace treaty of Tilsit, Davout became Governor-General of the new Duchy of Warsaw, where he oversaw the recruitment and training of Polish troops. In 1808, he was ennobled as Duke of Auerstedt. But for all his military prowess, Davout was not a popular figure. Notoriously tough, his troops respected rather than loved him, while several marshals were irritated by his air of superiority and blunt manner. In 1809, with war looming with Austria, Davout rejoined 3rd Corps at Regensburg. When Archduke Charles advanced into Bavaria, the army's temporary commander, Marshal Berthier, nearly left Davout to be cut off. As soon as Napoleon arrived, he ordered Davout to withdraw. It was almost too late, but with immense skill, Davout and 3rd Corps were able to fight their way clear and rejoin the army. Davout played a major part in the counter-offensive that followed, known as the 4-day campaign, pinning Austrian forces at Egmul, until Napoleon arrived to deliver the decisive blow. A month later, at the Battle of Aspern, Davout and 3rd Corps never made it across the river. The Marshal's role was limited to trying to sort out the crisis at the bridges, until the French were forced to withdraw. When the army crossed the Danube again 6 weeks later, Davout was in his usual post on the right wing. On the first day of the Battle of Wagram, the Emperor criticised Davout for his slow attack. But the Iron Marshal, as he was now known, was saving his men for what he knew lay ahead. The next day, Davout's troops fought off a major Austrian dawn assault, then launched their own attack, gradually driving in the enemy left flank, helping to make Austrian retreat inevitable. Davout and his corps had emerged from another major campaign as heroes. The grateful Napoleon bestowed on him a new title, Prince of Egmul. For a few years there was peace in Central Europe. Davout spent most of it in Hamburg, in his new role as Governor-General of the Hanseatic cities, cracking down on corruption and illegal trade with Britain. In 1812, Napoleon entrusted him with the enormous task of organizing the Grande Armée for the invasion of Russia. Davout's 1st Corps alone was 72,000 strong, as big as Napoleon's entire army at Austerlitz. When it crossed the Niemen River in June, its troops were so well turned out that one observer compared them to the Imperial Guard itself. Davout's giant corps was the spear tip of Napoleon's invasion. He mauled Bagration's 2nd Army at Saltanovka, but could not prevent its escape. 3 weeks later, his troops were in the thick of the fighting at Smolensk. But Davout's lack of allies among the other marshals began to show. Many were keen to see him taken down a peg or two, including Napoleon's...
Yeah, I was about to say, I watch all of these different marshals not come to his aid and stuff whenever he's actually needing it. So it has been good that he hasn't been needing it, but yeah, watch them all just, obviously watch him fall and stuff like that, but it didn't happen, so...
Chief of Staff, Marshal Berthier, and perhaps even the Emperor himself. When Davout got into a row with Marshal Murat, whom he regarded as incompetent, Napoleon decided in Murat's favour, giving him one of Davout's divisions. On the eve of the Battle of Borodino, the Emperor dismissed Davout's request to outflank the Russian defences. "You are always for turning the enemy," he told him. "It is too dangerous a movement." In the bloody battle that followed, Davout's corps led the frontal attack on the Flèche earthworks. The Marshal himself was injured when his dying horse rolled over him, but remained on the field directing the attack, which was ultimately successful. 6 weeks later, the Grande Armée began its infamous retreat from Moscow. The remains of Davout's corps was ordered to form the rearguard, but he was criticized for moving too slowly. Near Vyazma, a gap opened up, and Russian General Miloradovich pounced. First Corps was routed, and saved only by the quick intervention of Marshal Ney, Eugène and Poniatowski. Ney's corps took over as rearguard, but when he became cut off at Krasny, Davout was widely blamed for not turning back to rescue him, even though it would have been suicidal. The moment highlighted the gulf in charisma between a marshal like Ney, who was loved by the troops, and Davout, who was not. Davout began the 1813 campaign holding Dresden, but when Hamburg was raided by Russian Cossacks, Napoleon sent him north to organize the city's defense. Exactly why Napoleon kept his best marshal in Hamburg while a decisive campaign raged in Saxony.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it kind of seems like he didn't believe in his own mind that Marshal Davout was, saying the best, was his best marshal. I don't think he thought that in his mind. I think that he thought that he was a capable one, but I don't think he thought he was his best one. And, I feel like if he did think that, he would have been more keen to listen to him and stuff like that, or more keen not to judge him and on some of the most smallest things that you don't really see these type of judgments on that he bestows on other marshals. It's just on Davout. So maybe in his own mind he didn't think that, and that's why. But yeah,
continues to puzzle historians. Davout was a stern and effective governor of Hamburg, securing the lower Elbe River and Napoleon's strategic northern flank. He organized a new 13th Corps, and following Napoleon's defeat at Leipzig, withstood a 6-month siege. Davout only surrendered Hamburg in May 1814, after confirmation arrived of Napoleon's abdication. But what difference the Iron Marshal might have made at Bautzen, Dennewitz, Leipzig or Long remains a tantalizing what if. Davout was not welcomed into the restored Bourbon regime like other marshals. His loyalty to Napoleon was despised by the ultra-royalists. Instead, he was forced into retirement and put under police surveillance. When Napoleon returned to France in 1815, Davout and Lefebvre were the only marshals waiting to greet him at the Tuileries Palace. But once again, Napoleon gave Davout a role which, in hindsight, seems a disastrous waste of his ability. Davout was made Minister of War and Governor of Paris, vital roles requiring a brilliant and loyal administrator, and Davout worked miracles to raise a new army for Napoleon's final campaign. But if Davout, not Grouchy, had commanded the Emperor's right wing in 1815...
Yeah, so again, that just kind of goes to show, maybe he just did not think the world of him, in his tactician, but he still thought, he was a smart marshal, and, an intellectual marshal, but he wasn't and obviously he was, but I'm just saying in Napoleon's mind, I'm thinking that's why he made the decisions why he did, and all that, so.
Who knows what might have been? Following the Emperor's defeat at Waterloo, Davout organized the defense of Paris and urged Napoleon to fight on. Later accepting that he must abdicate, Davout ensured Napoleon's safe passage to the coast and submitted to the Bourbons. The Royalists had promised Davout that his officers would not be prosecuted for their conduct. He was furious to discover these assurances would not be honored. He also testified on behalf of Marshal Ney, but could not save him from a firing squad. Davout was stripped of his rank and income, though they were restored 2 years later thanks to the intercession of Marshal MacDonald. Davout shunned court, as he always had. His health was failing, and in 1821, the death of his eldest daughter left him grief-stricken. He died 2 years later of tuberculosis, aged 53. Davout, the youngest and least proven of Napoleon's marshals, proved the most capable of all. Cool under fire and a brilliant tactician, he was the ideal corps commander in battle. A superb administrator, he was a stern and loyal deputy for the Emperor in Poland and Germany. His main weakness was his severe and blunt manner, which won few friends and left some even wishing to see him fail. Not something they saw from the Iron Marshal very often. So concludes our ranking of Napoleon's marshals. 26 dramatic lives that reflect a tumultuous age. Products of a military meritocracy forged in the French Revolution. Skills honed by 2 decades of war.
Technically, for a good handful of them, even more than just 20 years, because a lot of them were fighting years before the revolution. So a lot of them their whole life was nothing but war, and it's just crazy to think about how, you know, past civilizations used to be and how lucky we are in our continuity. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't take that for granted at all.
Their fates entwined in the rise and fall of empires. History may never see such an extraordinary, diverse and colourful collection of military commanders again.
Alright guys, we'll go ahead and end it right there. So yeah, just a little sad to see that end, but yeah, it's just one of those things where I'm definitely going to get into some. If you guys know some more Napoleon content from other great channels, let me know that have, are on the same par as Epic History TV, because I don't want to react to something that's going to, diminish the outlook of, the Napoleonic Wars, because it was such a grandiose thing. But in any case, so if you guys like the video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys again for joining me on this episode. I'll see you guys in another one. I'm out. Peace.